Hi everybody, I'm back again and I'm feeling much better. Thank you very much. um, so for those of you who are just tuning in, I've been off for a little while because I've been sick, and now I'm back with, for the most part. Bear with me though, because I'm going to be a little bit this for the next little while until I get my feet again. But I figured best to hop right back into things again and start trying to stream and finish telling a story so that I can go on to tell more, because there's so many more, and some that I want to retell, and some that I've published but I haven't read. So who knows? Okay, so I'd left off on chapter 9, so I'm on chapter 10 now, which, like I said, if you're just tuning in, this is your first time tuning in, I highly recommend going back to past broadcasts so you can listen from the beginning of the story, because we're on chapter 10 of the story now, so we're a good chunk of the way in. Alright. And the name of the story is Guardian of the Sword. This is a special edition. I have published Guardian of the Sword. That was the 1977 edition. This one I found after the fact, kind of, and now I want to do some comparisons to see if there's anything I want to change to the copy I've published right now, or if I just want to do a simple separate edition entirely. Maybe you can help me decide. Okay, without further ado, I have Chapter 10 of Guardian of the Sword. Chapter 10. Death to enemies of the king! Dark ones, hear our wild swords sing! Death to the dark-haired western men! Death from foothill, plain and fen! Down with Verdun's wooden walls! See now how the fortress falls! Enter now how the fortress falls! Enter now through the broken gate! Now they rally, but too late! Hunt them now over hill and plain! Bright swords strike and strike again! Arrows fly under morning sun! Fiercely now the battle is done! From the Battle of Verdun by Artir One-Eye of the Midland Plain. Orn, far from slackening his assistance to the Albanians for concern for Helena's safety, had encouraged the Icarians to join them. They now had a force of over 100 Icarian archers. Also, they had been able to recover enough of the Hygerian horses that they were able to mount 130 horsemen. While the infantry numbered 500, they were, altogether, about equal to the garrison in Verdun, which would have meant that they were not equal to the task of storming it. However, they had arranged a plan which they thought might grant them more success. And to add to that, they were making their descent on Verdun somewhat sooner than they had been expected. As they moved over the last slope before Verdun, Conall spoke to Rorik. "We are here at last. I had always disliked the idea of allowing them to build this fortress. It has made our provisioning and recruitment difficult." Rorik answered, "I think, though, that you will be glad that we allowed ourselves the extra time for training." I agree, things would have been a little easier without the fortress, but better the restrictions of the fortress than an army thrown into battle too soon and lost. And here we are now, and we have come to the plains to stay. Before they attacked, they sent a message into the fort, wrapped around an Icarian arrow, demanding that the occupants surrender in the name of Conall, heir to the throne of Asbalon. They received an answer on the shaft of a Hygerian javelin, demanding that they surrender in the name of Razak, king of the Hygerians, destined conqueror, shepherd of the people. Rourke looked at the army. It was the same tatterdemalion force, a little larger now, still variously armed, but all determined to fight. He looked at Connell. They will make a fight of it. Whatever one might say about the Hygerians, they are not cowards. Connell nodded. True, all true. But here is the ram. He turned to call a word of command, and a trumpeter sounded his horn. The swords of old Asbalon lay long in the dust. The shield of my fathers crumbled to rust. From my haunt in the hills I have come to the plain. What Drixfield did forfeit, let Verdun regain. Rourke answered. The time of the axe and the sword is upon us. Fly above us the storm clouds fly. Woe to the widows and woe to the orphans, for husbands and lovers will die. The horsemen had earlier prepared a ram, cutting down a medium-sized tree, and fitting 6 pairs of stout rope handles to it. A group of them now bore it forward between them, while Icarian archers stood ready to prevent any Hygerian from casting missiles at them with impunity. Some of the horsemen held shields up to cover those bearing the ram. For a little, the ram swung with no apparent effect save for a booming noise against the gate. Some Hygerians risked showing themselves above and beside the gate to cast missiles down, and some suffered Icarian arrows for their pains. 3 of the horsemen were downed by missiles, 2 of them killed. Then the gate creaked. 2 blows later it cracked. On the next blow, the great bar inside which held it shut was driven from its fastenings, and the gate flew open. Without hesitation, the horsemen rode in to prevent its being closed again, while Rourke, now afoot, led the infantry in almost at their heels. They advanced steadily, in formation, until a wild rushing band of Hygerians threw themselves forward to break it. They succeeded, sacrificing themselves in the deed, shouting their own language. Washriba Gel Hagir. We do it for the families. Behind them came more, advancing steadily to take advantage of the disruption. But the second line of Asbalon's infantry moved up steadily, restoring the situation and ending the barbarians' last effort to win the battle. Most fought and died where they stood. A few managed to cut their way out and flee. About 30, too wounded to continue fighting, surrendered. The Asbalonians were elated with 2 victories in as many days. Though Rourke and Connell knew that surprise had as much to do with it as anything. Indeed, it was part of their success that the Hygerians were not used to holding fortresses of any sort. They repaired the gate of the fortress and established themselves in the neighborhood, and called on the people to come to them. At the same time, they sent the host out in small groups to deal with any more nearby small Hygerian garrisons. Rourke and Connell personally led several of these forays, but most of their time was spent in the gathering of an army. Still, strangely, no Hygerian force came against them. Swift as the legendary birds of Brahandon, the word went from village to village, from farm to farm. Connell is down from the hills, and the red dragon standard is raised. The sword which is not to be named has been unsheathed. Come, men of Asbelon, to the fortress of Verdun. Offer your swords to your rightful king. Plans were made for attack against Ordon. The walls of Ordon were built entirely of good stone, and save for Avantir, was the only strong Hygerian fortress east of the mountains. Recruitment and training went on, and they found themselves less pressed for good horses, a situation which they did not expect to last for long. They took some of the better soldiers of those that had been in the hills, and set them to work teaching the new men that came in. They knew that they could not expect to wait until the new men were trained as well as the old, but they did intend that they should be given as much training as possible. When the time came, they would be divided up and placed among those who were smilingly referred to as the veterans. 5 days after the taking of Verdun, an important event happened. Late in the afternoon, Connell and Rourke were talking matters of strategy in one of the tents, which had been pitched outside the fort to accommodate the expanding war host. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside. Going out, they saw 5 men riding into the camp. The leader of the 5 was a large man, becoming fat and quite old. His white hair and beard surrounded a wrinkled, weathered face. He wore a war shirt, a leather jacket with several metal plates sewn to it, and his cap was leather, bound with 3 metal bands. His sword was large, the hilt wooden, once broken, but neatly mended with wire. On the scabbard was some writing, done in silver threads, though some of the original threads had gone missing, and had been replaced with ordinary white thread. But more interesting was the fact that the letters were letters of the Shimruther, the kingdom of the elder folk, which few mortal men could read. A few among the host who claimed acquaintance with these letters declared that they were the name of Thumil the Lucky, Thumil of the 3 Rings, hero of elder legend. This news went through the army of Asbelon like wind through a standing wheat, a sustained whisper. 4 young men with him were obviously his sons, armed as well. The father bore a shield slung at his saddle, round, made of wood, with a metal rim and boss. His elder son had a copy of that shield, without the metal, and a sword. The other had an axe and a cap, made of many folds of leather, boiled to harden it. One had a bow and arrows, and a longish bronze dagger, clearly the workmanship of barbarians from the wild lands. The last bore only a 6-foot spear, and wore a cloth cap with a feather in it. The eyes of all remained a moment longer on this last, for he was slighter and darker than the others, with thin, almost feminine features, strange in light of the broad, blonde handsomeness of the rest of the family. The father swung down from his saddle, and the others also dismounted, simultaneously, as though it were a thing they had practiced. The father tossed his reins to the son with the wooden shield, then strode toward the group before the tent. After running his eye quickly over them, he spoke. "You'd be the king," he stated at Connell, then turning to Rourke, "and you'd be the guardian of the sword. Now, lords, begging your pardon, but could you show some proof? You see, we, hearing about men in the hills, with names being given, and some of those names being names of men I know to be dead these 5 years and more on Drick's field. I am not saying that as one of part of the story is known untrue, the whole must be lies, but I am wishing to be sure. But now you're here, and you're successful enough in what you've done, and men will be coming to you, and if you be not what you say you are, those who be coming might slightly be finding themselves lost. It may not be heroic, but I'm having a strong desire to be knowing who it is and what I am fighting for. Rourke smiled. I sympathize. Here is my proof. The sword came free of its scabbard. Here is the sword which is not to be named, and with it I will do all that is within my power to deliver and defend Asbaln from her foes. And I stand beside Conall, rightful king of Asbaln, my sworn lord. Will that suffice? For yourself it will suffice. As for I am knowing the look of the sword, and I am thinking that no man might be swearing a false oath on it without bringing woe to himself. Yet, for the look of the thing, I would be having the king speak for himself. Conall shrugged. I am Conall of Asbaln, son of Gunn, of the line of Conall of the Wild. No reproof have I, save that those here follow me, believing me to be who I claim to be. The old farmer nodded. You are either the king, or the one who will serve as well. I am Cada, son of Fanan, son of Brennan, son of Fermal. These are my sons, Fanan, Vandinel, Danan, and Briogir, who will be joining your host, with the exception of Briogir, who must be staying with the farm. The youngest began a protesting motion of hands, but subsided. You're the youngest, Briogir, and perhaps the best able to care for the farm. Tell the neighbors, tell them we've seen the king, and we'll be going with him. Briogir swung up his horse, saluted the king and his father, then rode away. Cada looked at the king and said, He'll see to it that the neighbors know. He's a good lad. Cada and his sons were assigned to one of the infantry captains, and Rourke and Conall returned to the tent. And as Rourke and Conall returned to the tent, they heard the old one speaking to Cada. Your youngest son, you name him Briogir? Is that not a Tyrudian name? His mother named him so. She came from Tyurid, after some sort of strife and feud there. She spoke of being of the Vaihohect clan. Indeed. The old one's voice told that he was impressed. I would speak to you about this again, Cada. During all the time that they remained about Verdun, they had scouts in pairs and small parties out to watch Orden and all the area between. It became clear that the Hygerians had no intention of sending a force against Verdun immediately. Rather, they were strengthening their hold over Orden, bringing in more men and supplies. Reports of casual conversations with Hygerian officers revealed that it was expected that the Asbalnians would hurl themselves against the walls of Orden and be destroyed there. There were now more than 1,000 men in Orden, with more always arriving, and food was stored for half a year. The men of Asbaln did not have that much time. Orden must fall swiftly, and the king must at least have possession of the whole of Midland plain by winter. The old one lent his assistance, showing them how to build machines capable of throwing arrows or small stones for great distances, or engines for throwing large stones against city walls or gates. With these, they hoped to be able to take Orden swiftly, before some Hygerian force could fall upon them as they camped outside the city walls. 3 weeks from the fall of Verdun, they went to Orden. One morning, the barbarians in the city looked out to see an Asbalnian army of over 1,000 outside. Okay, And that is the end of chapter 10. So, yeah, like I say all the time, normally I would be marking it up, and then I'd want to kind of, reflect back on what I'm thinking about it, but I'm not going to mark up the hand-typed paper, because this is very old copy on an electric typewriter. Yeah. Well, it may actually have been done on the 1982. I think he still had the portable typewriter, so it wasn't electrical, or else he was just switching over from the portable to the electric typewriter. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep on tapping. It's fine. Yeah, so this went okay today. I will try and do this again tomorrow. We're gonna see. It's all about how I'm feeling right now. Ebbs and flows, I guess. But I kind of want to. It's low enough a commitment that I can probably do some readings for the rest of the week. So tune in again tomorrow, where I will continue reading. I don't know if I'm going to do one on Friday. We'll see how I'm feeling. But until tomorrow, I'll talk to you again really soon. Have a good night.